Warning: the following podcast contains graphic content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Discretion is advised. The Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast is available free of charge thanks to the support of Cracked Armor.
Their mission is to raise awareness for PTSD, TBI, and mental health to support those who struggle. By creating an army of warriors who represent the gear, their hope is that it will send a message to others that they are not alone.
Go to crackedarmor.com, say hi to Mark Long, read about the story, and find some research information about PTSD. And if you can, look good while supporting Cracked Armor by buying some gear.
(10-9). Did you say Papa Tango Sierra Delta? 10-4.
There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
This is episode 36 of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. My name is Larry Payton, and I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. This introduction is just going to be an email I received this week, something I would like to share with you. Good morning, Larry. I write to you today from my home in where I've been a proud member of the police service. Needless to say, like so many of us, seeing the absolute chaos, carnage, and evil of the world got the better of me to the point that booze became my life and I was calling in sick or leaving work sick due to withdrawals. I finally reached out to my and met with our police psychologist who quickly referred me to, and I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. I was accepted into the 63-day Guardian program at Homewood Health in Guelph, Ontario, and flew out there in stayed in a hotel and got drunk that night, but managed to check in the next day at 0800 hours and commenced detox and then treatment. I can say without a doubt, Homewood saved my life and I have been sober since. I should also mention that before I went to Homewood, the police psychologist put in a claim for PTSD and alcohol use disorder with WCB. About 6 stressful months later, I received a letter that I was approved for PTSD claim and my wages have been covered. I attempted a brief return to work, but experienced too many symptoms of PTSD that forced me to go back off. I have reached out to Wounded Warriors Canada and attended their 2-part trauma resiliency program, which also was life-changing. I wanted you to know that I began listening to your podcast on what I call my daily mental health walks and finished the last episode yesterday. I wanted you and your guests to know how important your program is to my recovery. Every episode made me feel like I was in the safe circle with first responders that have seen the shit and get it. It's connection through shared experiences. I continue learning and working on myself and see a psychologist weekly specializing in PTSD and first responders. Please continue what you do and always know I'll have your 6. To the sender of this email, please know that I'll always have your 6 as well. Keep moving forward. I appreciate you. I validate you, and I walk right beside you. Let's take a quick break.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you have experience with post-traumatic stress and would like to join me for an episode, please reach out to me. You can contact me via direct message on Instagram, PTSD_podcast, or you can send me an email at Tango Sierra Delta podcast at gmail.com. Cheers. And we are back from the break. Thanks for sticking around for the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. On today's episode, we have a hugely special guest. I'm pretty excited about this one. We have Greg Munck. He has written a book called The Guide, Surviving, Warfighting, and Peacemaking. And I'm going to say if you read the book, but we're just going to X that right now. It's going to be when you read the book, you're going to completely understand why his journey goes from literally surviving to war fighting to peacemaking. It is an amazing journey. Greg, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thank you, Larry, for having me. Really, it's an honor.
Thanks, brother. I'm excited about this. I love the book. It's phenomenal. It's a fantastic read. It is a true journey from start to the present day, which I loved. It's not like you just jump into your military career. It takes us from, some of the traumatic events you had as a child and just takes us through. So as I always on this podcast, Greg, please introduce yourself and tell us about your journey.
Yeah. Well, again, my name is Greg Munck, and I'm just humbled to be able to talk to you and to anyone that's listening. It's just, and any chance I get to share my story, it's a blessing for me, because it's truly just an incredible story. And it started, that the survival piece of it started when I was young. My dad, growing up, it was evident that my dad struggled with substance abuse, and it started with alcohol. Then it moved to marijuana. It was cocaine. Then it was freebasing. And then it was heroin. And then, so I saw a progression, from, it really was bad when I was 8 years old. From there till I was about 18 is when that cycle unfolded itself. And just, it was really hard. It was really hard to see that. And it was hard to hate your father. And as his disease progressed, he was more and more away from home, and more issues started to take place, and the more hatred I had for my dad. And so the first time, my dad had 12 accounts of drunk driving, or 14. I talked to my dad now, and it's like,
wow.
Was it exactly? But it's just crazy. Who has that amount of drunk driving? And then the first time I hit my father, first time I ever really got in a physical altercation, I was 13 years old, and it was my dad. It was to stop him from driving drunk, and most of the time he was pretty affable and, fun guy. But when he drank too much, he'd get angry. And I'm like, Dad, he would have his keys, and I would go to stop him, and he'd be like, stick his chest out. And, oh, you think you're tough? And I go, no, Dad, just give me your keys. You're not driving. Not another drunk driving. We don't need that right now, Dad. And so, oh, you think you're tough? And he pushed me. And then I pushed him back, and then he hit me, and then just cold cocked him, knock him out. Take him to his bed, when you have an altercation like that with someone that's close to you, it plays on you. Then there's the times when I would just play around with the drunk, right? He'd be drunk and trying to get out the front door, and I would hear it. And so I'd run around the back door, come to the front, and then be standing there when he opens the door. And that's when he's really sloshed and just hammered. And then I'd go, and I'd be standing there, he's like, oh, darn it, and I go, give me the keys, Dad. And I go take him back to bed. And then I'd be sitting there, and then I hear him like making such a loud noise, trying to get out the back door, the backyard, to walk. So I'll walk out front, go to the side gate, and he's trying to get the gate open for 5 minutes because he's so hammered. And then he opens the gate finally, and he sees me there. And then he turns around defeated, wherever I go, he's always there. And it's sad and crazy that how much joy I found in those chaotic moments. And then then things progressed. The first time I ever had a shotgun put to my head, which every time I tell the story, I can't believe I say those words. Whoever has that for the one time in their life. But I was 11 years old, and my dad had stolen a Porsche from his drug dealing friend. And so he brought it home, and he parked it there. So he was afraid that there was going to be retaliation. So he had a guy sleeping on the couch, but I didn't know this. I didn't know any of this. I knew there was a car in the driveway, but I didn't know any of this at the time. He had a .357 Magnum on his nightstand, and there was a guy on the couch with a shotgun. So I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I startled this guy on the couch, and he makes his way running off the couch, shotgun, puts it to the side of the head, lights come on, and I just pissed my pants.
I guess so. Yeah.
Just terrified, and he's like, oh, sorry, kid, go back to bed. And I just kind of make my way back to my room, and I shut my door, and I pull my toy box in front of the door, and I pull my toy box in front of the door, and I lay in bed, and I just sit there, covers over me till the sun comes through. the morning sun comes through and I finally fall asleep. I remember getting out of bed that morning and walking out into the kitchen, and my dad and this guy are there, and nothing's really said, just kind of the nod at the table, like, that a boy, like I achieved something. But I can't even tell you how much trauma that places on someone, the fear that just instilled, not at that time, but like every time I got up to go to the bathroom for so many years, I was afraid of the dark, until I was probably 20 years old. It was very traumatizing, that event. Obviously, it's traumatizing for anybody.
Hell yeah.
And so, yeah, it's crazy. And then when that time I hit about 13, was really hit the fan with my dad, that just was some hardcore stuff. And I remember we'd go to this place in Fountain Valley, California. It's like this racket club, and it was a nice racket club. So I would go there. He would go, "Hey, you want to go with me?" And his drug dealing buddy had a condo there. And so I would go on the high dive and go play in the gym and, go in the pool. And I had fun as a little kid. And I would come back. I remember I to the condo one time. He's like, "Hey, I need you to come with me." So I get in the car and we go to Costa Mesa. It's in South Orange County here. It's in Orange County here. And I'm sitting in the car. It's this dark area. And I'm 13, and we're waiting there for like 10, 15 minutes. And then a car pulls up and my dad gets out, gets in their car. And it's like really covertly and weird. And he gets back in our car and puts something underneath the seat. And I'm like, I know exactly what it is. This is a total drug deal. And I'm sitting here with my dad doing it. And then so I was in 7th grade at the time, and then I go, "Hey, Dad, what's that?" And he goes, "Oh, just some plans, some business plans." I'm like, just playing it stupid, like smartest guy in the room, but don't say anything. Right. Like, okay, Dad, like, yeah, okay. So we go back to the condo, and I play for a little bit, come back, and I go on the patio, shut the door, just sitting there. And then my dad's there with this other guy. And then there's a bunch of girls there, and they're doing lines and coke. And all of a sudden there's a knock on the window, and I come on in, and so I come in there, 13-year-old, 7th grade Greg. And they're like, "Hey," my dad's like, "Hey, why don't you do coke with me? I'd rather you do it a line with me than your friends." And the girls are cheering me on and like, go. And so I do a couple lines with my dad and these people. And I remember just that feeling of like, I can't believe I just did, because 80s was no to drugs, and here I am doing drugs with my dad, and just tweaked me out because I knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do drugs. And so they put me in the limo, all the girls and the guys, and they dropped me off at my house. "Don't tell your mom, that I'll be home later." And so it just was one event after another. And I could talk all day about.
I mean, Greg, let's be honest.
It was pretty shitty. It was horrible.
If this was the end of the story right now, if this was it, this would be, well, no wonder. I mean, you've struggled with post-traumatic stress. Obviously, you had a shotgun to your head at 11, and you were encouraged, to do a couple of lines of cocaine at 13.
Yeah.
And it's, for everyone who's listening or watching, this is just the beginning. It's an unbelievable story. Please continue, Greg.
Yeah. And so I just can't, and then there'd be times when, I did a coke with my dad one other time when he said, "Hey, why don't you stay home from school and do some coke with me?" And I did some coke, and I went up going to school. And at that time, then my mom started to work full time to support, my dad, and all my money, like my in-laws were in Ohio. We come from the Cleveland area. And so they would send money for my birthdays and for all that. I never saw a dime. We were evicted 4 times, in the Fountain Valley area. We were renting a house, and my mom would tell me, and again, my dad was progressively, first he'd be gone for, 4 days, then a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. And then he'd come back, and then he was gone 2 months, he'd come back. And so, it was crazy. And so my mom really had to support the family. And, but it was in a middle, Fountain Valley, Orange County, it's a middle class area. And we were, like I said, evicted 4 times. I remember one time my mom's like, "Hey, tomorrow, boys, you have to move the house." And we're like, "What?" So stay home from school, I'll rent a U-Haul and take care of it. And so, just stuff like that. It was just so dysfunctional and so wrong in so many levels. And my mom did the best she could. I grew up, I thought Hormel chili and top ramen and macaroni cheese was the best. That's because that's what I grew up on. And then when my mom was home, she would cook and do the best she could for us. So really just crazy childhood. And as I said earlier, as it progressed, the hatred for my dad started just to go on. And I remember one time I came home from a night, and there was a bunch of people that couldn't speak English in our living room shooting up heroin. And man, it was crazy. And I freak out. I'm like, what the hell are you doing in my house? Get out of my house. And it looked like a crack house scene, like food everywhere. It was just crazy that like this is happening in my house, and got guys shooting up, and I'm like, get out of my house. They're like, no habla English. I'm like, no habla English, my ass, get out of my house. And then my dad comes up behind me. He's like, hey man, chill out, it's cool. Like, and I sit my dad in the chair. I'm like, stay there, I'll talk to you later. And I kick all these people out of the house, and then I come back, and it's just so many instances where I was the parent and he was the child, right? I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? And then one of many conversations in tears, and I'm so sorry. I will never happen again. I'll never do it. And it just won't. I promise it won't happen. And then sure enough, all the promises, he would, go back to drugs. And the best analogy I can give it, it's like when you as a kid, you forgive your parents, no matter how tragic and horrible it is. And so they asked for forgiveness, and then I would stick my hands out, and I would hug them and embrace them, metaphorically. And every time he would cut my arms off. Well, you do that enough times, you start doing that enough times where that hatred in your heart starts to grow. And I can't even describe you how much I hated my father, and I wanted to kill him. And I remember my mom would say, hey Rob, it's the Hop. It's this local establishment. They're calling, you need to go pick up Dad. He's drunk. So all of a sudden I'd be in my room. My brothers would come in, and they'd be embarrassed because they didn't want to, go inside. So they'd be like, hey, Greg, come with us to the Hop, come with us to go get Dad. I'd be like, no, man. He's like, well, I'll get you an ice cream. I'm like, okay. So like total bribery. And absolutely. I go in there, and then here's this like 12-year-old kid walking into the Hop. They go, I'm here for Bob Munck. Oh, there he is. And hey, son, and walking out with my dad. And as long as I got my ice cream, I didn't care. Every time there was a warrant served at our house, that's a story.
Wow.
Every time a warrant was served, everybody was embarrassed to go to the door. So I had two older brothers and my mom, obviously, but nobody wanted to go to the door. And one time it was just me and my dad at home, and I knock on the door, and my dad comes frantically in, and he's like, hey, it's the sheriff's. I'm not here. Whatever you do, I'm not here. I'm young. I want to say 10 years old, 9. And then so I open the door, and it's the sheriff's, and they're like, son, is your dad here? And I'm just looking at him. I didn't know what to say. And like, they kind of said something like, hey, you don't want to bait a criminal or something like that. And I'm just shaking my head. Like, is your dad here? It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong. Just, shake your head if he's here. And then I'm like, yeah, I shake my head, and I step aside and let them in. And my dad is making a beeline for our backyard, because a part of our backyard was the back of a food center. Like it's like a little 7-Eleven grocery store area. It's an alleyway. So he hopped over the wall, but there was a cop waiting for him there. And so he comes back over the wall. The two guys cuff him, and they're taking him back through the house. And I remember I'm sitting there looking at him, and then he just looks right at me, and he goes, you piece of shit. I told you not to let him in. Wow. And I just was like, and then I remember the cops going and like almost like hitting my dad. Like, what's the matter with you? This is all because of you, Mr. Munck. This has nothing to do with your son, and I just like lean back on that wall and just sit down in defeat, you take, I did something wrong. Like I caused this, and
absolutely.
I'm causing my dad to go to jail. And so, anyway, I could go on, Larry, but it just got bad. And then when it got to high school,
I was going to say, Greg, and that's the amazing thing. Thing, Greg, is that you would think then, like, again, you hit this part of the story, nobody knows anything else about you, and you're like, well, yeah, obviously, this problem just follows Greg. I mean, he must have become involved in drugs himself, must have become involved in this and that. And then all of a sudden,
Right.
high
Yeah.
school,
Yeah, high school. And Larry, it's funny. I just was thinking about this right now because I had such difficulty labeling that part of my book as survivor. This is so funny. Just talking to you right now. I've never said this before. It's just having this. I had almost trouble putting those words because it's such a word that's thrown around today. And I don't live in that space. Like I'm some victim, but that's the word. I talk about these stories and, oh my God, it's crazy. Oh, and I just want to go back a little bit of all the things that impacted me, all the things I just told you. The biggest struggle I have when I think about it, the things that bring me the most anguish is he missed my 11th, 12th, and 13th birthdays. I can't express to you how devastating that is for a child where your dad misses your birthday and he would miss it and he would come in at night, drunk, get in bed with me, and then the next day take me to like the family fun center, play miniature golf and arcade, and take me out to lunch and buy my love. And I take it. I took the offering, but one time we were going to go to Disneyland. I think I was 13 again. 13 was a bad year, and I remember I was so excited because we're going to go to Disneyland, and then I remember that day and your dad's going to be home at 9:00. You guys are going to take you boys. And I remember riding my bike up and down the block, waiting for my dad to come home. And then I get 11:00. Oh, your dad will be home in a little bit. 2:00. Oh, he's coming. Don't worry. He'll be here. 4:00. Oh, he's going to be coming. Don't worry. Here I am riding my bike all day, just waiting for my dad to pull up so he could take us to Disneyland. And he never showed up, man. And that one hurt. It just, you can only take so much like defeat as a kid like that when you can't rely on the person that is supposed to be there for you the most. And so it's funny, like all those things, this is the one that crushes me. And I don't know why, but it's just the realization, I think, because when those happened, it was like, oh, this is not someone that's I can count on in my life. And so I pressed on, and then so I'm in high school and I'm going to high school, and at this time things were bad, so I was writing my own. I would register myself for school. I started to work part-time to help pay for the football fees and all that. So I started playing football, and man, I love football. I was a big kid. I'm like 6'3", and I was getting taller, and I was thin and worked out, but I love to hit. It's like controlled aggression. And American football, it's like just awesome. And in between that whistle, I could go as hard as I can and hit somebody as hard as I can, and I don't get in trouble. And so I loved it, and I excelled at it, and I was super aggressive, and I loved to play defense, and I played defensive line, and I did really well. And there was this one instance where where I went public for the first time with somebody else about what was going on at home, because up until that time, my mom was like East Coast mentality. Hey, everyone's got problems. We don't talk about them. We don't share our problems with other people.
Right.
And so I never really talked about it. So my friends kind of knew something was going on, and I shared some things, but just not that much. And where I was lifting weights with the team, and my buddy Reza played this joke about where we get a curl bar. If you do like work out on a bench press, there's a bench, and you kind of spread your legs, and there's a little part of the bench still. And so what you do is you drop the curl bar in it, but it would hit the bench. And while you're dropping it, the guy's lifting, you're like, hey, look, it freaks you out a little bit, but the bar hits the bench. And you're like, ha, 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 you finished your rep. Well, my idiot friend didn't measure it properly, and he drops it, and it hits me right in the nuts. So I drop the weight and just in total pain. And then something snaps in me.
Yeah.
What you'll read throughout the book is this thing that deep inside of me just goes off, and I snapped and just was like fighting everybody, fighting Reza, fighting my friends. No one can console me. And obviously everyone knew something was more than just after that, not being in pain, something more was going on. It was obviously I was leaking something more. And the coaches came over and pulled me aside, one of the coaches, and pulled me into the equipment room and started talking to me. And he's like, Greg, calm down. What's going on? I go, dickhead Reza, drop the bar on my balls. And he's like, hope that's okay. I don't mean to get, too
This
vulgar.
is, listen, man, everything goes on this podcast. We talk just like we're supposed to talk. Everything goes.
Yeah. Well, that's how the book is. It's super raw and real. So he's like, I know he did that, Greg, but like, what's going on? No, there's something going on. He pressed in a little bit. And for the first time I shared with him, like, it's like, things are crazy. Just what I shared with him about my dad's alcoholic, where he's in and out of jail. My mom works full time. I don't even know. I have to pay for my own food, and I work here, and just explain to him. And then I have all this stuff going on at home, and my girlfriend is pregnant, and I don't know if I'm going to live anymore. And so, and he just looks at me and he's like, Greg, I had no idea. Cause at that time I was a starter, and, or I don't know if I was a starter then, but I was excelling. And he's like, I would never guess that you were dealing with any of that by the way you work. And cause that football was my life. I mean, I lived for that game. And so it was the first time though, that I opened up to somebody else and kind of let them in. And it felt so good to like release that and share that. And it was just the first step. And then I realized that moment, in my life, is it was so important. That's why I coached football for many, many years. Like for 20 years, I've coached football. I just stopped a couple of years ago. And I traced it back to that time, because coaches had such a big impact on my life. And I wanted to influence kids like that as well. And so,
Greg, this is the thing you talk about. I mean, this is an important part. I don't want to interrupt you, but this is an important thing, because, speaking about trauma is that's a huge wall to climb. A lot of people go years and years being afraid to climb that, and that's well into their adult years. So, I want to say that the fact that you did that in high school is amazing. It's a lot more difficult than a lot of people realize. But what's also amazing is that coach, because you got the feedback that you needed, which, let's be honest, that was a different time. I mean, we're in the 80s now. This is not exactly when, mental health is super out there and supported, right? So that's phenomenal that guy backed you up. Keep going, brother. Keep going. Yeah,
he did. So I remember he gave me all the money from the Coke machines, around the locker room, went to that program. So I left there with this big bag of quarters, so he's like, cause he asked me, what do I eat? And I'm like, hey, free peanut butter sandwiches a day, top ramen and mac and cheese. And, he's like, okay, I'm going to give you some money to go buy some good meals. So on the way home, I remember I went to Pup and Taco. It's like Taco Bell on the way home. Good choice, right? But that was awesome. So just small things, food was a driver for me, definitely. But so I did well. I had that just a great time in football, and I excelled. And there's more detail on that journey. But then what happened was, when I got to my senior year, and as my dad was gone more and more, my buddy had joined the Marine Corps, and so we just saw Full Metal Jacket, and it kind of shares my mindset at that time. And I really didn't fight a lot, but my friends had big mouths, and so I got in a lot of fights because of my friends. And I ended a lot of fights, and I was aggressive and all that stuff. And so here, senior year, we go to the recruiting office, and he's signing up for the Marine Corps. And then I start talking to the recruiter, and I'm like fresh meat for this recruiter, right? And I remember saying, hey, is there any conflicts going on in the U.S. right now, or in the world? He's like, no, there's nothing going on, And I'm like, so I wind up signing up for the Marine Corps because they're going to put us in the buddy program together. We get to go to boot camp together. So that was the promise. And so I signed up for the Marine Corps, and I came home a couple of days later. I tell my mom, she's like, you did what? I go, yeah, Mom, I'm going to go in the Marine Corps. And, I got to tell you, it's like watching Full Metal Jacket. Anyone that would watch that movie and then sign up for the Marine Corps, you could tell they got some screw looses. And
seriously, right?
And so I joined the Marine Corps, and it was quite an experience, I have to say, going to boot camp. What happened was that my friend Adam, we were going to go in March of '89, and we were going to go during that time together, but he couldn't wait. And so I played in the fall, I played football, and he just couldn't wait. So he went in October. So I wound up going in by myself in March of '89. So I go in the Marine Corps. But just really quick on just going back just a little bit, at one time my dad, took us to church. He had gotten clean and he made a commitment to God, and he started taking us to church, and we were there for like 30 days. And then 30 days later, he was back doing drugs. So for me, it was really polarizing. I was like, oh, Christianity is just for weak people, instead of shooting up heroin or shooting up God. And, and I made fun of Christians, man. I was so like, I just would mock Bible thumpers and all that. It's just so funny how life takes you, the journey of life. And so I go to boot camp, and because I'm tall, they made me a squad leader. And then shortly thereafter, they made me the platoon leader. And the platoon leader in Marine Corps boot camp is called the guide. And so hence, that's the name of the book. That's one of the reasons for the name of the book, is that I was the guide in Marine Corps boot camp. And you carry a guide on, which is the platoon flag. And so the drill instructor is always going, guide, come here, guide. So you carry the guide on, the platoon flag, so you're the guide. And it was the drill instructors would tell me things to tell the platoon. And so I didn't realize I was a leader until I really got in the Marine Corps. That really started to emerge, those leadership qualities. But went to boot camp, and I loved it. I love boot camp. It's like being in Hell Week in football. Love being challenged, love being pushed. It's just like Full Metal Jacket. And guys are getting yelled at, and there's people crying, I'd be like, oh my gosh, what are you crying for? This is awesome. But going through boot camp, and then like the book's got tons of my boot camp stories. They're just, one of them I want to make sure you hit, Greg, because this is one that I think speaks volumes about you as an individual, is when your guide-on flag is disrespected. Yes. And thrown. Absolutely. Yeah. Tell us about that, please. Yeah, Larry, that's a great story. It's that everyone loves that story. And so, and it really is it really defines the book and sets it on basically the first metaphor of the book for sure. And that is, we're in the Marine Corps boot camp. So this is the third phase of boot camp. So we've been, through, this is 13 weeks of boot camp. And we're at the very end, getting ready to graduate. We're marching. And everything we do, we can't do right. Everything we do, we can't do right. They're yelling at us, typical. And then, so they say, hey, we're going to go to the pit. And we're like, oh, crap. And the pit was this 50-yard by 50-yard field of sand, refined, the finest sand you've ever, over 100, like however old the Marine Corps is. And they've been at MCRD San Diego. And that's where I went to boot camp. And the finest sand, over hundreds of years of Marines just working out, in the sand pit there. It was crazy. So we start running to the sand pit, and I take my guide on and I stick it in the sand, and we start doing all these calisthenics. And the drill instructors, they have you move to a calisthenic, every 10 seconds, but they can't count. So it's like 10, 5, 3 push-ups, 5, 4, 2, leg lifts, 3, 5, 2 jumping jacks. You're just moving around in the sand. So we're literally doing this for about 40 minutes, and then we finally stop, and dust is everywhere. Like sand is in every orifice of your body, and you're sucking in air. You're sucking in air, and then the drill instructor picks up the guide-on flag, and he goes, "You are the worst platoon that I've ever had. Marines are rolling over in their graves." It just goes on and on and on, and then he takes the guide on and he snaps the guide on. So for everything I've just told you, Larry, that guide on represented, this was my new life. This was a new start for me. I just, like, it's so crazy to say, but you kind of understand. And now your audience says something broke in me. When he broke that guide on flag, something broke on me, because this was a new chapter for me. And so it was emotional. And then so I lunged for the flag, as you were, guide. So I stop, and he goes, since you love the guide on so much, why don't you lay down by it? So I lay down by the guide on. He's like, hey, turn over, face up. And he goes, I want the whole platoon. There's like 90 guys in the platoon. I want the whole platoon to line up, and I want everybody to spit on the flag. And so guys are lined up there, and all the drill instructors are there, and they're yelling at him to spit on the flag. And so a lot of guys, almost everybody spit on the flag except for some of the squad leaders and a couple other guys. It was crazy. So 90 guys goes through, and as you can imagine, if they're spitting on the flag, I'm laying next to it. There's spit all over me, all over the flag. Everyone's in formation. And so the drill instructor says, stand up, guys. So I stand up and just dripping with spit, and the flag's right in front of me. And he's like, spit on the flag, guide. And I'm like, no, sir. And I'm just like, there's no way. And then he's like, spit on the flag, guide. No, sir. And then they in my face now. He's like, I give you a direct order. I will court-martial your sorry ass. I will put you back to first phase of boot camp. You spit on that flag. He said, direct order, Marine. Spit on the flag. I'm like, no, sir. And I'm crying. I'm screaming, no, sir. I'm not going to spit on the flag. And then they pushed me to my knees. Like the drill instructors behind me with their knees behind mine, pushed me to my knees. And I'm in front of the flag. They're pushing my head. Spit on the flag. I go, no, sir. I won't spit on the flag. No, sir, I'm not going to disrespect my platoon or my country. And then they pick me up in this moment, and they're like, that's why you're guide. That's why you're guide. And I'm all jacked up like I won the Super Bowl, right?
I guess so.
Yeah, and so, I grabbed the flag. I remember it's on the broken in pieces, and I remember picking it up, and I'm like, this is our family. This is our Marine Corps. And then you just see the heads of the guys in the platoon go down, and it was a moment where I realized that, you can't always just follow orders blindly. You have to stand up for what is right. And I was never going to spit on that flag no matter what they did. And they knew that. And it was all just this exercise, a final phase of, okay, who really is worthy to be a Marine? Obviously all those guys were worthy of it, but just to kind of attest. And so really that really defined, that's really what they want to do in boot camp is they want to break you down. It doesn't matter what religion you are, where you come from. It was black, white, it was Hispanic. It was every color under the sun. And we all love each other. And we all had a common purpose and a mission, and it was all become Marines. And it's just amazing. It's such a light in our society that when we're all we all have the same purpose and mission, it changes you. And anyway, so boot camp was really good. I wound up graduating the guide of the platoon, and that was awesome and really exciting.
Amazing.
And I got to,
yeah. And Greg, the thing is for anyone who's listening and doesn't realize this or doesn't know a whole lot of military history, what's interesting when you talk about a Marine and the flag, the infamous picture, black and white picture, you'll see 6 individuals hoisting the American flag. That photo is of 6 Marines. That is on the first hill of Iwo Jima, which is in the Pacific of World War II. That is what that flag means to a Marine. And the other interesting thing about that, of the 6 individuals, 3 of them never left Iwo Jima. They lost their lives there. But they're not looking at the camera. They're not posing. There are 6 men in unison putting a flag in the ground because of the ground they just won. And that to me, sir, me was an exact moment when you picked up that guide on that. You respected that at a different level that most people can't. And I just wanted to make sure you told that story, Greg, because to me, that defines you. To go back, and we're going to continue on, but to go back to what you said, that, you found it difficult at the beginning to say that you were a survivor, but you were. Absolutely. You were a survivor, but you, sir, were not ever a victim, because everything that happened, well, you took it and you became a warrior. And I say a warrior, not even in the sense of a Marine, but I say a warrior as a person who, life has thrown a lot at everybody, but Greg, it's thrown a ton of shit at you. And you have always come through. And I have a great deal of respect for that, brother. I have a great deal of respect for you. So I just wanted to make sure you shared that one, man. Just keep going with the journey,
absolutely.
brother.
No, I could talk all day. It's emotional for me. But it's been so cathartic writing the book, and I'm so glad I did. And my kids really encouraged me to do it. And that's what I wrote it for initially. It was my children, so they could hear these stories, so they wouldn't forget these stories. And so, I go to boot camp and I graduate, and it's awesome. And then I meet this beautiful girl named Kimberly, and so she's gorgeous, and we're dating, and we're hot and heavy, and things are awesome. And then all of a sudden she goes, here in California, there's a movie that came out recently called Jesus Revolution. And it really depicts this. It's Chuck Smith and Greg Laurie. It's Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. Well, Fountain Valley is right next to Costa Mesa. So Kimberly went to a Monday night Bible study with Greg Laurie, and she had grown up in the church, and she recommitted her life at this Monday night Bible study. And she comes back to me, and she's like, hey, we can't have sex anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? We can't have sex anymore. Like,
Deal breaker.
That's not part of the plan. That's not on my schedule. But, she had this she recommitted her faith. And so we were still together, but I moved out of her house. Like, her parents let me stay in a room. And I was on Camp Pendleton, which is it's about 40 minutes away from where I was staying. And anyway, that was July of 90. In August of 90, Iraq invaded Kuwait. So that was the Kuwaiti conflict where Iraq went in there to take Kuwaiti's oil. And so we sent a bunch of troops over there, and that was in August. And my unit was slotted to go. And so for the first time in my life, I was, starting to really look at my life like, oh my gosh, I might die. And what happens when you die? And so as I was asking those questions, my brother went to a funeral and had a faith experience at a funeral. And then, so he's like, hey, there's this event called the Harvest Crusade at the Pacific Amphitheater. Now they're at Angel Stadium around, they're massive events, but at that time it was at Pacific Amphitheater. And this guy, Greg Laurie's doing it. And Kimberly's like, oh, that's the guy on Monday nights, you'll love him, Greg. So anyway, I go to this Harvest Crusade, the first one, 1990, and I go every night. It's like a 5-night event. And the first night, there's worship and a message from the Bible. And then all these people come forward to receive Christ, to receive God. And so I'm watching this and I'm just like, no way. Like every night I had a different excuse. And so fast forwarding, every night I would go back though. Something was drawing me. And so every night I would go, and then every night I had a different excuse for why not to surrender. And man, it was either my pride or, it was pride or my sin. Like I felt like, oh, I'm not worthy of this. Like God doesn't want me, man. Or it was my intellect. Every night it was a different excuse. Well, that last night, Thursday night, I was there, and every night I'd seen music and worship, and then Greg Laurie give a message, and these people come forward, and there I was, like he did the same thing that night, but this time everything was coming full circle. I remember him saying, it's not about religion, it's about a relationship, and God wants to have one with you. And that really ignited with me, because I don't like religion. I really could relate to that comment. And so, and then I remember him giving that invitation. I went down. I remember for the first time just surrendering and saying to God, like, God, if you can help me do the things I know are wrong, I want to be your man. And the biggest thing was every night, all those excuses, every excuse I had, it wasn't that excuse I had wasn't the excuse. The issue in every single one of those excuses was, can I trust God? Is God going to let me down like everyone else in my life? And that was the struggle. And that fifth night, I just came to terms, and I'm like, Lord, I surrender. I tap out. I can't carry this anger from my dad anymore. I can't carry this burden. I need to release it. I need to give it away. So I just surrendered my life to the Lord. I became a Christian that night, and I really didn't know what that meant at all. But I did. I gave my life to Christ that night. And so I remember a friend came over the next day. And he's like, hey, I heard you're born again. And I didn't even know what that meant. And I'm like, no, I just decided to stop living for myself and start living for God.
That's deep.
And that's how I look at my life. That was the moment I stopped living for myself and I started living for God. And I said goodbye to Kimberly a bunch of times. We didn't leave till December 1st. I left on ship over to the Gulf War, stopped in Hawaii, stopped in the Philippines, and we stopped in Oman. We did a beach landing, the biggest beach landing since Korean War in Oman. And it was televised to all give the indication to the Iraqis that we were going to do a beach landing in Kuwait. That's the famous Schwarzkopf left hook that he was starting to initiate. So I was a part of that. And I was attached to RLT 5, 1st Marine Division, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines headquarters. And I was a biological chemical warfare trained guy who, based on the chemical agent that they use, or nuclear agent, or whatever they use, and the wind and temperature. I can tell you how long it's going to be in an area and different things like that. So I was attached to a combat unit, and man, I know we don't have tons of time, but there's a whole story there of that day we did that beach landing in Oman, and we get back on the ships, and then 2 days later the ground war starts. We get off in Saudi Arabia, we unload everything the night before, and then the day of the ground war we go ashore, and we were a part of clearing. We went inland about 10 miles and cleared the Al Wafar forest. It's this area where we did clearing operations because the communications weren't what they were, and in 2 days or 3 days, Iraq wanted to do a ceasefire, but not everyone heard that. So we did operations where we cleared. So there'd be some resistance. And there was one instance where we got some mortar fire from a stray Iraqi unit. And then there was some argument about our position. And I was the map guy. And I clarified where we were. And 2 Cobras came in and leveled this area and where these guys were. And we walked the thing, and the only thing that was left was body parts, and so that was a crazy moment. And then because of my MOS, I was also doing graves and registration, and so we only had a couple casualties on our side, but the massive casualties on the Iraqi side. And so we would take the prisoners of war, and we would escort them to pick up their bodies and match the body pieces and the body parts and help them. It's horrific, it's horrific.
Absolutely. It's horrific.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so that was my experience. There's a little more there, but in the general sense, that was my time in the Gulf War. And so we leave, we
Greg, and one of the things I just want to bring up for other people that something that'll resonate with a lot of people, and I sort of want to hear your side of it, is a lot of times the sites certainly stay with you. But one thing that I really find that hits me that I can't get over are sounds, but most importantly, smells.
Yeah.
Like,
oh gosh,
smells. I mean, is this the same with you? Does anything bring back those days?
Yeah, I it's so funny in the book, in that chapter, I kind of speak in more general terms, if you notice that, because it's hard for me to get in the details. But one thing is we called it living the suck, because 750 oil wells. Yeah. And I guess I should paint that picture for the audience. Imagine 750 oil wells over a 100-mile radius, busted, oil squirting out of it, and all on fire. And obviously after days of that, it was 12 o'clock day and it looked like night, because there was just oil mist in the air and it was all over your clothes and you would suck that in. So we called it living the suck. That's the one smell. And then the smell of oil, and then blood, and just was overwhelming. And the sounds, and then just when those mortar rounds went off, I can't describe to you how loud it is. And
no,
if it was a good mortar team, I wouldn't be talking to you. If it was a U.S. mortar team, no way I'd be here. But
there you go.
They were trying to find where we were, and they weren't close. But it was loud, and the bullet sounds, and then just even in concussions in a distance, as you're trying to go to sleep, sleeping under the Hummer at night, and then I mean, it's like this crazy chaos and beauty. And here's how I best describe it. I describe it as being in combat is like the feeling you get when you see a really tragic accident, when you drive by and cars are mangled, or you see blood, or it looks like, oh my God, that person's dead. That feeling you get inside, mixed with playing in the biggest sporting event you've ever been in. Those two adrenalines smashed together the same time, 24 hours a day. That's
a great metaphor. That's a great way to explain it. Yeah, that's a fantastic way to explain it. That really just screwed with my mind. I'm like, whoa, what? Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so thank you for mentioning that, because I don't mind talking about that stuff, because there is a visual picture, there is a emotional picture with the sights and sounds, and I would say smells and the hearing of things really triggers me the most of anything.
Same here. I'm with you. Exact same.
And then the visual stuff, I just have to, I can go to a movie that's a war movie, but I just have to prepare myself, because it's hard. It's really hard. So
I imagine.
Anyway, we get back on the ship. I get awarded, I got combat promoted in front of everybody on my ship. And so that was awesome because of my actions in the Gulf War, which were nothing compared to others. But I'm learning not to minimize my actions.
Don't do that.
So,
Yeah, don't do that. No.
Yeah. So still, it's hard, right? And then that's why even writing this book, like when I say I'm a survivor, dude, there's way worse stories than mine, right? But
listen, Greg, before we started recording, we had a conversation and we had a little bit of a talk. You wanted to know a little bit about me, and that's, I mean, I can't help being the exact same way, brother. It's like, you're like, so what happened to you? And I'm like, well, man, all I could think was not even close to what you've been through, but still.
But it's
not a comparison thing, right? It's
not.
It's a reality of what you've been through. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that in a second. The PTSD clinic I went to this past February, that I'm part of now. But anyway, so I go to the Gulf War, and then I get combat promoted, and then on the way home, Bangladesh had a super cyclone hit, and then 150,000 people died, and 1 million cattle. Just a man. And so it happened, and it's on the way there. We were told we might go help them on the way home. So we got to Bangladesh in India, it's the Gulf of India, 2 weeks after it happened. And there were still the bodies there, all those bodies I just mentioned. And so cattle, children, chickens, pigs, washing up on the shore, bloated and disgusting. And I mean, almost worse than the war, or just as.
Yeah.
And we gave aid to the Bangladesh people. We gave medical aid for 2 weeks. We were there. And they called us Angels from the Sea. So the operation is called Operation Sea Angel. And I got a humanitarian service medal for being a part of that. All of us did that were there. And so that it's just like the Marines, we can be your greatest friends or your worst nightmare. And I experienced both. And that literally a month after the Gulf War, we're helping people in Bangladesh, bringing them food and medical supplies. So, I get home. I mean, we're on the way home. We stop in Philippines and Hawaii again, and we're getting ready to go home. We're there, docked at Camp Pendleton, off the coast of Camp Pendleton, and that next morning I go ashore in a landing craft, and then they put us in cattle cars, take us to the air station where our family and friends are. I haven't seen in 6 months and 29 days. I used to know the hours and the minutes,
Wow. Yeah.
And we all line up, 5,000 of us. And they asked me to carry the Marine Corps flag for the unit, and just so humbled. Like, this flag keeps coming up like that. Your point, Larry, that you made about Iwo Jima, I haven't even thought about that from a metaphor perspective, just what that, because it means so much to me that they asked me to carry the flag. And so I remember carrying the Marine Corps flag for our unit. We're marching down the runway. We can hear the crowd roaring, and we're singing the Marine Corps hymn. All of us are bawling. We're so grateful to be home. So grateful to be home. We're just bawling. And then we make that right flank into the crowd. And I'm standing there, and I'm going to get to see Kimberly. And we're all standing there as the commanding officer is speaking and telling us, just talking. I couldn't even hear what he was saying. It was like a Peanuts, Charlie Brown, when the adults speak. And I just waited. I remember sitting there just thanking God that I was home, because what I didn't talk about is the day I left for the Gulf War, I was on a ship and Kimberly was on the dock. And I remember being on that dock looking at her, and it was painful weeks saying goodbye to her before that. And I remember looking down at her, and for the first time in my life, I thought I was going to be a wreck, bawling on the side of the ship. But I was on that side of the ship, and for the first time, I felt the assurance, that peace that passes all understanding, the thing you can't explain or discuss. There was this comfort of, Greg, you're going to be okay. I got you. And I had peace standing there as I was pulling away from the dock, and the love of my life is there. And at that time, Kimberly was my family. Like because of the way I grew up, friends were my life. And of course, now Kimberly was my life. And so I was saying goodbye to her, and here I am, flash forward, boom, standing there in front of my family and 10,000 other people cheering for their family members, for their Marine that's home. And then they say dismissed. And then Kimberly comes running up, and I got pictures of it. Thank God I have pictures of that. When she gets in my arms, and I just grab her and twirl her around like in a movie. And it was just such a beautiful time. And it's such a beautiful time. And an observation came to my head at that time that just a little insight. When I wrote the book, I was trying to think about who was there when I got there. And obviously my dad wasn't there because he was in jail. All of his drunk driving's caught up with him and drug offenses. And he got put in jail for 6 years was the sentence that he got put in for. So he wasn't there. But then I was writing the book, and I remember I was asking my wife, hey, Kimberly, who was that? When I came home, who was there? It was like my brother Rob, my brother Derek, and their wives, and your sister, and your parents, and Rob's, and my mom didn't come, you know? And
Wow.
I went and visited my mom in Ohio afterwards. She flew me out there, but she wasn't there. And now, so I didn't think about it until I was writing the book, because now I have 5 kids. You know, I'll get to that in a second, but I have 5 children. And I thought about it just as a parent now of kids. How in God's name did your son come home from war and you weren't there?
Absolutely.
Your son. And I just was like, it just went over this to kind of rehash this thing in me. And my mom recently passed away actually this year in March. You know, it's just won't go into that, but
my condolences.
You know, that's another show talking about processing your, you know, I had a different relationship with my parents, you know, because of all that I went through. And so anyway, I loved my parents, but it was just different. And because I couldn't count on them. So friends were everything to me. And anyway, so fast forward, I'm home. We're driving home to a surprise party that happened for me. And I remember when all the telephone poles going home, it was like, happy birthday, Greg. Merry Christmas, Greg. Happy Easter. Like all the things that I missed when I was gone, they were on the telephone poles when I was driving down our street towards our neighborhood. And anyway, we got home, and man, Larry, I don't know how much time we have, but
take your time, brother. You take your time.
We start meeting with we're going to get married. I proposed to Kimberly before I left for the Gulf War. So we're going to get married. I'm meeting with the marriage counselor, and he goes, hey, Greg, hey, why don't you come up and be a counselor up at camp? I'm a camp director. And I'm like, dude, there's no way. Like, I'll cuss at the kids. And, you know, I don't know enough about the Bible. And he's like, no, man. Hey, it's only through the blood of Jesus. Any of us are worthy. So why don't you come be a counselor up at camp? And I'm like, oh, okay, dude. And so Kimberly and I go, and I'm a counselor, and they stick me to all these inner city kids, you know, from Maywood and Compton and Long Beach here. And, man, I was still in the Marine Corps, and man, I loved it. I treated these kids were flowing attitude, man. And it was awesome. And I remember they're like, you're not my dad. You're not my mom. And I'm like, hey, this week I'm your mama and your dada. You know, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to make you pay. And there's some funny situations in the book that talk about there. So I won't go into that, but what I loved about that situation there, like coming back from the Gulf War and then going to a summer camp, you know, I got back in June. It was like I went to summer camp like a couple months later, and I remember being there, and then I was with these kids, and our story was the same. My story was their story. They all had fathers that had left and died. It didn't matter the color of our skin. We were all victims of a fatherless cabin, you know. And man, we bonded like incredibly that week. And I remember Dan asked me to share my story that week. And I'm like, dude, I mean, I don't know if I'm ready for that. He's like, no, just tell him your testimony, share what happened with you in your life, and, you know, in Harvest Crusade. And like kind of I was telling you guys now. And so I did, I shared that, and it just was incredible to see all these kids coming up and asking for prayer after I gave my story. And I remember telling them there that, guys, I need prayer because I hate my dad, and I don't know how I'm going to forgive my father. I hate him so much. And I know it's only through God's forgiveness and the forgiveness that he has shown me that I'm going to be able to show my dad forgiveness. Well, we go through that camp, and it was awesome. And I felt a call to youth ministry. So I start volunteering and helping out in youth ministry. And then that year, my mom calls me from Ohio. My dad got out. It was like it was a non-violent crime. So he was like time and a half plus good behavior. He was like, you know, he's like the prison cook, and, you know, my dad's got a personality. And so, but so he got out like in 2 years, and my mom calls me up and goes, hey, your dad's getting out. Can you pick up your dad? And I'm like, call somebody else, Mom. You know, even in my new faith. And I don't trust my dad as far as you can throw him, right? And he's like, hey, nobody will pick him up. Can you pick him up? And so I go down to El Cajon Jail in San Diego, where he was. He served time in Orange County Jail and El Cajon Jail. And I go down, I pick him up, and we're driving back, you know, and I was telling him about the Gulf War and my experience, you know, of faith. And he's like, hey, I committed my life to Christ in jail. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, you remember that time I tell you about how he took us to church? That was like, there's no way.
Right.
I'm like, okay, Dad, whatever you say, you know, like, yeah, you know, it's all about action. Talk doesn't mean anything.
Yes,
you know,
sir.
I hate sounding so pessimistic, but like, just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean I trust him and like just forgive him carte blanche. I hated the guy, you know, and so sure enough, just long story short, in that over the period of 2 years, I started to have lunch with him, and I could sit at a table and across from him, and I would go, Dad, why would you let me do cocaine with you when I was 13? You know, why? And just the tears in his eyes, he'd be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Greg. Would you forgive me? And then I just went through every issue I ever had with him. We just go through it and we would talk about it. And he would beg for forgiveness. And I'm so grateful for those opportunities because I started to love my dad again. I started to forgive my dad, and my dad's faith and my faith, reconciliation started to happen. This kind of miracle took place over a period of 2 years that I can't even explain it, Larry. I can't explain it. It's a miracle.
Some things you can't put into words, brother. There's some things you just can't put into words. Yeah.
I can't believe it happened. Like, just telling you that story, like, you probably feel my anger when I talk about my dad and the hurt. It's still there.
It's pain.
Yeah.
It's pure pain and disappointment.
And just to talk about how my dad my dad was sick for 8 months, and then my mom passed away, and then he's doing better now. And, and he comes to my church, now. And so, guys, fast forward here. I start going to Bible college at night. I get out of the Marine Corps. I take a job in a semiconductor company. I have a couple other jobs before that, but I won't bore you with that. And I take a job at a semiconductor company, and I start doing Asia Pacific sales. I do really well. I make just incredible money. I'm volunteering my youth minister in youth ministry. I become the director of that camp I was so afraid to be a counselor at, just like 5 years later. And then I become a youth pastor at 2 churches, and we start having kids, and I have 5 amazing kids, 4 boys, 1 girl, and just incredible journey that is. And then in 2001, I was at a church, and a guy I know, JP, asked me to come on staff at church full time and leave this incredible job I have at QLogic. And through a long series of, it's in the book, check the book out. You can get the whole heart behind it. My wife and I just came to a decision where I was going to leave my job at QLogic. I was making like $300,000 a year, 150 in sales, 150 in salary. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just,
no, but that's give you, it's perspective. It's perspective. Yeah.
I took a church job. It's a big church. It paid like $65,000 in California. That's a great church salary, but nothing what I was making, but just to make that decision, such a radical decision. I'm pretty good at making decisions, like trust, but it's afterwards I have buyer's remorse, like, is that the right thing?
I guess.
Should I do? Well,
yeah.
So I went into full-time ministry at a church here in Aliso Viejo called Coast Hills. And then I did that, but it took me about 2 years to leave QLogic. So I left, and I started like full-time ministry before it was like QLogic was my main thing, and I would take time off to go do that. That time church became my main thing, and then QLogic was second, but I didn't leave it completely until July of 2003. And I've been in full-time ministry ever since. And then in 2005, my buddy JP and I started Crossline Community Church. It's the church I'm at now. We've been here 18 years. We have a church of about, I would say 3,000 call it home. We get about 1,400 on a Sunday. And
wow.
God just totally blessed it. I'm the lead pastor here. He's the senior pastor. And I'm just totally blessed. I can't believe that there's so much there that we didn't talk about, but I can't believe I'm a pastor. I'm the guy from high school. They're like, wait, Greg, I hear you're a pastor now. And I'm like, I know. I can't believe you. Yeah. So,
well, there's a reality that hits me when I'm reading the book, Greg. I'm like, hold on a second. Now we started where he had a shotgun to his head and he was doing cocaine by the time he was 13. Yeah. And then he's a pastor. What, like, there's this, what happened? And it's an amazing story, brother. It's an absolutely amazing story. I mean, tell us about your family as well. Tell us about your kids, which I know you said you wanted to hit on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my it's so funny. I have just amazing kids. It's so funny. I just wanted them to play football. I was a football player, you know, and it meant so much to me, right? And so I wanted them to play. I wanted them to experience that. But they all became artists and singers. And a couple of my boys played football for a little bit. But then my son Noah, he really fell in love with acting. And he got, long story short there, he got cast in a little show, kids show on Nickelodeon called iCarly.
It's not that small of a show, buddy.
No. Yeah, but he became Gibby on iCarly. My son is, yes, I'm the father of Gibby. Gibby Gibson on iCarly for 7 years. He shot that show, and that was an incredible experience, man. And my other kids are just as talented, and they're doing music and worship music and acting, and they make their own music on Spotify. It's just crazy what all that they do, and I'm just really blessed. And after the iCarly, he was on the Goldbergs on ABC for 10 years, and he's a full-time actor, and he's not a big Hollywood guy, but he loves the craft of acting. And so anyway, that's, my kids, my daughter sings, and she's doing really well. She lives up in LA. And then I have 3 boys at home still, but one just graduated college, and the other 2 go to Vanguard University, and they're in theater. So all my kids are in the arts. It's crazy. This big jock, Marine, has these artistic kids. So it's all because of my beautiful wife. She's the artistic one. And so let's,
please share something about a little bit about her, which you do certainly in the book, but this is an amazing lady who ends up becoming, I want to say, I shouldn't put words in your mouth, but to me, like my wife, she's your rock. She becomes your foundation, your base. She becomes what you finally, for the first time really in your life, have someone that you can depend on and remain someone you can depend on, which is, it just became amazing.
Larry, you're going to get me emotional, man. Like that, those words you just said, they've resonated these past 2 years. Like people who grow up in situations like myself, we don't trust anybody and we can't rely on anybody. So the fact that God has been true to his word, I mean, he has been so faithful, and my wife. And so my journey into PTSD and all that of being a veteran is, I say, I was the guy who, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I never looked back. I never talked to anybody I was in combat with. I was a detacher, not in things in my actual life. I'm a go-getter, but when it came to like me dealing with veteran Greg, Marine Greg, I never even talked about it. I don't have a tattoo. I didn't have a sticker on my car. I didn't go to veterans meetings. I didn't talk about my Marine Corps experience at all. And so, except my family. And I say that because really the only thing I had in my life was Jesus and Kimbry. Kimbry was that rock. And thank God I had that, because I don't know if I didn't have, I had Jesus, so I know where I was going. But if I didn't have Kimbry there going through the PTSD stuff when it was starting to leak out of me and deal with me and be honest with me and be a partner, I don't think I'd be here. I think I'd be a casualty. Like so many other veteran brothers and sisters, 22 a day, veterans. And that's we're not even talking about the cops and the police officers and the public servants that kill themselves because of trauma, processing trauma. So I really didn't step into that. It took me 16 years to go to the VA. And I won't tell the story here, but that's a great story in the book about how I came to realization of my own PTSD and, started talking about it and being okay with it and starting to put a sticker on my car and being proud to be a Marine. I was always proud, but, I never went to Memorial Day celebration. The first time I went to one was 2 years ago because I don't want to lean into that. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about those things. And so, and then, and in writing the book, and I did this series for a buddy of mine, Kenny, on his, it's called Every Man Ministry. It's a series on the guide I did. It's on my website if anybody's interested. And it's a 5-week series on things from my book, all the military experiences. And he wanted to do something to help vets. So I started doing that. And then I started to tell my story and vets started to reach out to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, all this preparation in ministry, all these years, and now God has prepared me for a time really to step in to help veterans. And then I met this guy, Damon Freeman with SOF Missions. He runs a free clinic out of Tampa. It's every month. It's 5 days. It touches on physical, psychological, social, and spiritual. And it's a Christian run facility, but that's not all that they focus on. It's 3 phases of PTSD. It's to deal with the physical trauma. You might have TBI, traumatic brain injury, things going on. Deal with the psychological, and deal with the spiritual. This 3-facet phase. And he has a clinic I went to. It took me 2 years to go. He was pushing me to sign up, and I finally went in February. Now I'm the West Coast ambassador. That's just this year. So,
wow.
Larry, I'm new to this, and I started the Guide Soldier Foundation. Now I speak down at Camp Pendleton once a month to active duty Marines, and now I help guys like my buddy Tyson, who was struggling 3 tours in Afghanistan, wanted to kill himself. He watched my guide series and then read my book, and then I convinced him to go to this SOF clinic. He did. It changed his life. It's a completely free clinic. They fly you out there. They provide all the care, and it's 5 days. They feed you, and it's incredible. So if anybody's interested in that, just my website, gregmunck.net. But now I'm besides what I'm doing at Crossline as a lead pastor, God has opened this whole new chapter. Maybe it's another book one day, Larry, about helping veterans, helping active duty, and helping the suicide crisis. God's called me to that.
I would love to read that book, because I am very interested in following you, sir, for quite a while, and I do hope our paths continue to cross.
Yeah,
Greg, I mean, this it's huge. I say a while ago that there's certain things you can't put into words. Well, sir, your life is tough to put into words. I mean, let's go back to the title of the book.
Yeah.
Survivor, Warmaker, Peacekeeper. Yeah. And for people who at the beginning of the podcast were wondering why it's called that, well, it's right there. Yeah. There you go. I mean, that's the 3 stages of your life. Now, your life is not done yet. There's another stage happening, and this will be an interesting thing. Greg, when we talk about the post-traumatic stress, and certainly it's abundantly clear why you have been diagnosed.
Yeah.
What do you've come a long way. I mean, you look at you, and I just during this recording, you've been, I mean, you've experienced a lot of emotions, which is fantastic, and I love that, because you are a true man and you are true to yourself.
Right.
But what I love is that you can experience some of those painful things and pull yourself back, and I think there's a big thing for people to learn here who are listening to the podcast in terms of not getting stuck. And let's talk about the metaphorical sand back at boot camp, not getting stuck in that very, very fine sand of hundreds of years, which is again metaphorical for your life and your trauma.
Yeah.
How is it that, what advice do you give people, Greg, to try and free their feet from that sand?
Sure. Well, one thing is, another part of, I call it the guide, because obviously God has become the guide of my life, So there's the guide from the boot camp, because I was the guide, but also I surrendered my life and I let God guide my life. And one piece of that, one answer to that is spiritually. I can't get into all the details now, but there's research done at Duke University about how religion and having a relationship and seeking religion provides positive steps towards your recovery of PTSD. It gives encouragement, it gives mission, purpose, and so it's scientifically, there's studies out there. It's incredible. There's lots of them. But what I have to say to the veteran that I think is, it's okay. Like, God makes, and I think Lieutenant Grossman says it best. That's why I put that quote in the beginning of my book. It's the wolves, sheep, and sheepdog analogy that he gives. And that is that there's wolves. There's psychotic people who want to do harm. And no matter how nice you are to them or what you give them, they're going to be, it's like that quote in Batman, it's like, some people, Master Wayne, just want to see the world burn. There's some people that are just evil and they want to hurt people. And so then there's the sheep, which is majority of the population are sheep. They run from any type of physical altercation. They don't want any part of it. They are the ones that are filming when people are doing an altercation. And then there's the sheepdog. And the sheepdog are the ones that protect the sheep. And that's us. That's you. You're a law enforcement officer. You're a sheepdog. You put yourself in harm's way all the time. You know, I'm a Marine. We're the warrior class is what I like to call it, the sheepdog class. I've been in sheepdog my whole life, and I kind of pointed out in my book. I've had this in me. The way I was brought up, it made me this. I had a big justice guy. Wrong. And so I would just, all that to get to is I would tell the warrior, I would tell the veteran, listen, it's okay that you like to defend our country. It's okay that you like your job of killing evil. It's okay that you like to call down fire from heaven to defeat the enemy, and that you like your job. And a lot of veterans feel guilty. They can't reconcile. How can God love me when I like doing what I'm doing? Not that they like killing people, but they like killing evil. They like destroying things that want to destroy them or destroy other people. And it's okay. God made you that way. God made you a warrior, and that's a path that he has taken me on. I've had to deal with that. And I'm not going to apologize for being the way God made me. God made me a sheepdog. God made you a sheepdog, fellow veteran, fellow warrior, fellow law enforcement officer. And don't be ashamed of that. It's okay. God accepts you as you are, and you need to realize that in everything that you've done, every trigger that you've pulled, every bomb that you've dropped, every situation where you've had to harm somebody else, God forgives you. God loves you. He knows that's the way you're wired. And that's my message to my fellow veterans, is that don't be ashamed of how God made you. And God's not ashamed. You don't have to change yourself completely. God accepts you as you are. And you need to hear that message. God loves you, and he wants to have a relationship with you. That's the hope I want to bring. That's what's helped me.
That's remarkable, brother. That is remarkable, brother. Absolutely. There is so much to take away. Greg, I really don't want this to end. This is a great conversation. I have a lot of respect for you, man. I'm really happy that you made the time to talk. Yeah. I'm really grateful for your story, but also I'm grateful for you you certainly have, as I say, been through the shit, and you have set a fine example to anyone who has likewise been through, to know there is such a thing as post-traumatic growth. There is such a thing as recovery. Yeah, those scars are going to stay with you, but you've earned those scars. It's okay. They're not bad. Don't hide them. They're okay. That just shows again that you were a sheepdog, and that you have protected the flock, that you have been there, that you have done your job. It really comes back full circle to finding what it is that will save you. And I love the fact that for you, it's been God, it's been Christianity. Right. And as a believer, I can't imagine likewise, that being taken away. That's difficult.
It's that one pillar we're talking about, there's people that struggle with, it's that physical, the psychological, and that spiritual pillar. It's all three. And that's why I love this SOF mission that I'm part of. They attack all three. It's not, most people just focus on one, the physical, or they focus on the psychological. It's all three. And that's what's important, to deal. Absolutely. We need to deal with all of our physical issues, our mental issues, and our spiritual. We need to come to reconcile that God loves us. He does. God loves you, no matter what you've done.
Thanks, brother. And God loves you too. God loves you for sure. Greg, how do people get their hands on the book, man? I mean, people are going to need to read this book. This is a reality. This is a fantastic story. And for those listening or watching, this is really just a teaser taste to really get the full story. You need to read the book, or you can also listen to the audiobook, which we had spoken about before the recording. That's kind of neat. So how do people track it down?
Sure. Yeah. You can go to my website. It's gregmunck.net. And also you can go just to ordertheguide.com. So if you search for my name, Greg the Guide, that comes up too. You can find me. You look up Gibby's dad. you can find me on the internet. Greg Munck.
Gibby.
Go there, and then if you go, and then on my website, it goes to the Order the Guide link, and there's a paperback, there's a Kindle version, and then there's the audio version. And of course, I did it everyone told me I had to do it in my own voice. And so I recorded the audible version of my own voice, and that just came out a couple weeks ago, and it's doing really well. So that's my favorite. I'm an audio listener anyway, learner. So I prefer that method. So I think people will like it. And you get a lot of emotion too. A lot of emotion that we felt, both of us, Larry, today. It comes out when on the audio of the audible version. So
I imagine now. See, now you've got me interested in that. Yes. Now I need to listen. Greg, I want to end off on this, brother. And typically I end off on a lot of, PTSD things, but I think this is the real important takeaway here. When you look back at especially your upbringing, what do you think it means to your kids to have two parents that they have that love them and there for them? What difference do you think that makes? That's enough said right there,
Larry,
sir.
You're like the vet whisperer here, man. These questions, man. It means I can't express to you how much it's important. I have amazing kids, and we're really close, as you can imagine. Just Kimberly had a difficult childhood too, and we're two people who figured it out on the way, and it's so important. Both of my son Micah, my middle kids, got engaged this week, like this past couple weeks. Micah and Elijah, and we just had a party. So I was just talking to everybody about them, and it just goes with this question, because I'm so blessed, and it's so great to see the things that are good about you and your kids, and that are bad about you and your kids come out of them. But I think it's just so important. I mean, it's been such a tremendous situation to have my wife and I as partners in raising our kids together. And it's just not that single parents, can't do it well, but it's just been so, I'm so blessed that my kids don't have to go through the same thing I went through, and
yes, sir.
But I would like things to have been different when I grew up, but I wouldn't change it, because it made me who I am. And the way it made me is help me parent my children. And I have some, and they're not perfect, but hey, man, I got some great kids. And so I'm so grateful for that.
No, they're perfect to you. There's no doubt about it. Mine are to me. And it just comes down to what exactly is your idea of what perfection is. And I don't think there's not a thing I want to change about mine. I love them. I have two daughters and I love them. So, brother,
that's awesome, man.
Listen, man, that is fantastic. We'll just look at how your kids turned out, man. I mean, you've got them going through college now. One just finished. One's engaged. You've got, an accomplished professional actor. You've got a singer.
Right.
I mean, Greg, I think they're pretty close to perfect. They're pretty close to perfect.
I'm so blessed. I really am. And that's part of it, the story. And then, so my dad, we give talks about, our life together, now. And we've given testimonies together. It's just blessed. I feel so life's not easy. There's a lot of hard things still, but man, I'm a blessed man, and I live in that. I feel I have contentment. I'm blessed. I'm grateful. And I struggle with, that things come up and trigger me, and, but I'm just blessed. And I live in that. I'm so grateful. I live in gratitude every day, Larry.
I love that too. And I think that's fantastic, Greg. You brought that up, because it's not still there. It's still there. It doesn't go. Yeah. I mean, you can get better, but you don't go back to the person you were. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'd like to just sum it up for the listeners as well. Go out, support this story, support this man, support the book, support your brothers and sisters. This is absolutely amazing. There's a lot to learn and take away from that has not been shared on this episode. However, I do want to say, and I can't help but think, I'm sure there are times that each one of you have felt that you were walking amongst burning oil, that you lived in the suck, that it covered you, that the day was night, that pain was all around you. No matter what you did, it was there. However, you just need to keep pushing forward, pushing onward. It's not always about miles. Feet and inches count too. And someday, so long as you keep pushing forward, you too are going to be a person who comes home on that boat full of
Yep.
tears, full of smiles, and appreciating what you have around you.
Yep.
Take
Yep.
what you have. Don't live in the pain. Use the pain to grow, to make yourself who you want to be, not who you were. My name is Larry Payton. I have your 6. Please have mine.
I sing here, don't go away. There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I sing here, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.